Yeah, mateys. Yeah, I tell you what, it's nasty out there today. Chilly, windy, rainy. We could even get some snow. You may even be able to hear some of the wind howling outside here. But it's nice and toasty in the boat because I put in one of these park diesel heaters. They're called a park heater because they originally used, I guess, on trucks and cars where, you know, if you ran your engine, you had heat, but when you parked, you didn't have heat. So now they're called park heaters. There's a lot of them out there, and there's several name brands that are very good, I'm sure. You know, for $2,000 to $3,000, they ought to be pretty good. There's another company that sells them for around $700. And if you go on the internet, you'll find a lot of them, what they call the cheap Chinese knockoff. Well, I don't really like to call them cheap. They're not expensive. It was $180 for the one I got, and it was a 8K, which is probably more like a 5K. But when you compare and look at the information, and now I'm not an engineer. Just from my point of view and from some of the things that I've seen on the internet, I don't see much difference between the $200 unit and the $3,000 or $4,000 unit. Now, of course, they're going to say, well, you don't get service. You don't get help if you have a problem. Well, I got to tell you, I emailed each of those, of the bigger companies, I emailed each of them with a question, I don't know, 4 or 5 days ago. I still haven't got an answer. So I don't know about the service of it. And if this unit only lasts me a couple of years and I have to buy a new one, all of the duct work is run, the electric is run, I'm money ahead, I think. If you go to my website, Vagabond Epicurean, you click on the store, and I've got some links there so you can, if you want to review and see if this might be something for you, you can check that out. I want to tell you a couple of things that I've learned in putting this in. The biggest issue is finding room for it. Now, I put it in our quarter berth because we only use that for storage. And then when I got it installed, I put a board in front of it, and I didn't seal it, and I just put a board up in front of it so that things didn't fall back and get next to it. Another key thing is ventilation. Two kinds of ventilation. First, the fresh air that comes into the unit that blows across the fins to heat the air. Also, the intake for the combustion and the exhaust. Now, they say you really need to run the exhaust down. Well, on a boat, and that exhaust port would be so low, there'd always be water in it. So mine does go down. It does go back up again. For right now, I just have it vented out through one of the cowlings. I will eventually get a regular exhaust port for it, where you drill a hole through the stern of the boat and you can attach the vent to it, and that's probably going to be a little bit more efficient. I cranked this thing up the other day. Like right now, the heat coming out of that is about 100 and, let me just see. I'm a little far away, but the heat coming out of that is 120 degrees. I mean, that's heating the boat up pretty well. What I was surprised about when I'm running the ductwork, I used a piece of PVC in one area to go across the shelf. That gets hotter than the aluminum dryer vent that I got. So I think using the aluminum dryer vent, if I add more outlets for air, is going to be the way that I'm going to want to go. The other thing is there's different thermostats. Now, I've got the LED one, and that provides you with the most information. When you get ready to shut this off, don't just flip a breaker and turn it off. Go through the process. It takes it about 8 minutes to shut off because it's cooling the air so the air chamber doesn't get really hot. And that's the other thing though, is I am adding another DC panel for some of the extra things that I have. I don't like to put a lot of stuff on the battery. I like to be able to shut it off. So once I shut this off and it's cooled down and it's in the off mode, then I can flip the switch and shut the power to it. Because even if it's off, that little LED readout and thermometer and control is going to draw electricity. It's going to drain your, it might take a week for it to drain your battery, but it is going to be putting a constant drain on your battery as long as it's lit up. So be careful of that too. The other thing I found is on the exhaust pipe, I did wrap it with a titanium lava rock motorcycle exhaust pipe type of thing. I don't know if you really need to do that. That still gets pretty warm. I think the key is have space where the exhaust pipe goes through and it's not touching anything, because when I did the heat gun on it, the wood around that where I ran it through was not getting warm at all. You come down a little bit, it might have been like at 120, 130. Now if I crank this heater up to number 5, the air coming out that vent is like about 150 degrees. And of course that exhaust vent is going to be up there too, probably in the 200 range. So you've got to be careful with that. Plywood will turn to like a charcoal with excessive heat of over 250 degrees over a long period of time. I don't think you're ever going to run your heater that much. The other thing is, if I'm leaving the boat for more than a few hours, I shut the heat off until I get more comfortable with it. You know, if I'm running up to the bathroom, that's one thing. And I'm not going to go through every little detail of how I install it. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's pretty easy too. The other thing with the Chinese knockoffs are the instruction manual. Sometimes the wording is a little strange, but you get the point of what they're trying to do. One of the key things too is, there's two things I want to talk about, the pump and the muffler. All right, the pump, that's a magnetic pump. That little piston in there is going up and down. It's working its little old heart out. But the only lubricant it has is a diesel fuel going around it. So you don't want the muffler straight, because there's going to be little air bubbles that come from your tank, whether you use your fuel, which I'm using my boat fuel tank, or an exterior fuel tank, an extra tank. There's going to be little air bubbles in it, and that's normal. If you have your pump straight, the air bubbles are going to form on the top of this, and you're going to have metal rubbing on metal, and you're going to wear out the pump quicker. Where if you have it, and they recommend anywhere from a 30 to 90 degrees, so that air comes up to the top and gets forced out, so that the piston is always lubricated. And it's a pretty sophisticated, really it's pretty sophisticated and accurate. I think it pumps 0.02 milliliters. And the way you get the heater to produce more heat is you increase the speed of the pump and how much fuel is going into it. So like right now I'm running it at number 1 and I'm keeping the boat very warm. 28 degrees last night. It was still 68 degrees in the boat, so I feel pretty good with that. But I calculated out at that, if I run 24/7, which I'm probably not going to do, I can run 2 days, 2 days on 1 gallon. Now if I crank it up, of course, I'm going to use more fuel and I'm going to need more. But this is, now just listen. That's pretty quiet. I mean, an electric heater puts out more noise than that. Now, another thing on the mufflers, and they really do make a big difference on the outside of your boat. People walking by, or if you have it in a lazarette or something, there's two kinds of mufflers. You see here, there's one that the air kind of comes in, goes down through a baffle system, and then back up and out. That's okay, but that does restrict airflow a little bit. If you get one and you look in it and you see straight through it, you say, well, there's nothing there. Well, look to the sides, put your little finger in there, and you'll feel there's baffling on the sides of it. So the air comes in, goes through those baffles and out, and it's much more efficient than the one that causes the air to come in, kind of do a little dip, and then go back up and out. So that's more efficient. And that's important because airflow on these is critical, on all of them. Oh, back on the fuel. All right, so you kind of have to look, if you're going to use your existing fuel tank, like I did, they send you there's a inlet or outlet port that you can drill a hole in your aluminum tank and put that in. Now, I happen to have a access panel, so I was able to open that, put a rag underneath on my hand, drill my hole, and then put this fitting in. But the hose that attaches to that would have been too big to drill a big enough hole for that to go through and then put this fitting. So I needed to get underneath there to attach that. Some of these do come with a fuel tank pickup tube where when you drill that hole to put the fitting in, it's already got an aluminum, or I don't know what kind of tube it is, but it's already got a tube that all you have to do is just measure how deep you need it to go, and you trim that, make sure that you clean it out so that it's not compressed, and you can do that. Or, like I know some people who are using the auxiliary tank. Heck, as far as that goes, if it's in your lazarette and it's easy to reach, you could put your 5-gallon jerry can in there and just stick the hose down in that and you'd probably be all right. Well, some of them come with, it's like a white plastic hose, and it's the diameter is very small. That's better than the ones that come with, they're either green or orange. That hose is a little bit bigger, and the diameter of that will allow you to just push that onto the fuel filter. Oh yeah, there's a fuel filter with it too. Onto the fuel filter and onto the fuel pump without having a attachment piece to go to it. The problem with that is, and from what I've seen on watching some of these things, it does pull up a little more fuel, and that little bit of fuel does put more weight on and more stress on the pump, because it's got to pull that extra weight of fuel up for how many feet you're running this. How far can you do the run? Well, the further you do the run, the longer it's going to take the fuel to get started. And when you first start these things, I got an error code, E8, which means wasn't getting fuel. All right, you shut it off, you leave it sit for a few minutes, it resets itself, you start it again. Took me 3 times before, and I could watch the fuel being pulled in, and then all of a sudden when I got there, boom, kicked right in. When they first kick in, they're a little louder, the fan runs a little bit hotter or higher, and it's going to burn a little hot to get started, and then once it gets going, you get to what you have here now. Pretty nice. Well, I think that's pretty much it. I did get one of these little laser guns just to kind of check where things are. I mean, we're sitting here now, I know my thermometer is reading about 68 degrees, and the vent is kind of pushing air up. And yeah, I got 72 degrees on the head here, headliner. I need to do a little better work of running the ductwork so that it's more efficient. But I hope that helps you out a little bit, and would be appreciated on my part if you decide to buy one. If you go through my affiliate account on Amazon, would be greatly appreciated. Help us buy a little food here and there. And until next time, guys, happy and safe boating to you, your family, and friends. And stay warm.